Welcome. I'm Zaid Haji, and in today's episode, I want to take you far beyond headlines, statistics, and generic financial commentary. We are going to uncover the real signals hiding inside India's currency circulation, signals that reveal not just what is happening to cash, but where the entire economic machine is heading next. This is not theory. It's a pattern I've studied for years under some of the most influential minds in global finance, and once you see it, you'll never be able to unsee it. So stay with me, pay close attention, and let's begin. Before we dive in, ask yourself one question. If the way money moves is already changing right in front of your eyes, are you still thinking about the economy in yesterday's language? Because the moment a nation shifts from paper to code and the data begins to reveal it, everything else in the economic machine starts to realign. Stay with me until the very end of this episode, and I'll show you not only what is changing, but how to position yourself before the transition becomes irreversible. You may think of cash as something static, a few notes in your wallet, a few coins at the corner shop, but in truth, it behaves more like a living organism, constantly moving, adapting, and quietly signaling the health of an entire nation. And if we pay attention to those signals, we begin to see where the system is headed. The latest currency in circulation report from the Reserve Bank of India, week ending August 1st, 2025, gives us exactly that kind of signal, and the pattern it reveals is both fascinating and deeply revealing. Let's begin with a simple fact. As of that week, rupees 37.52 lakh crore worth of physical banknotes were circulating in the economy. But here's where it becomes interesting. The rupees 500 note alone accounts for the largest share, over 6.43 volume pieces in lakh, worth a staggering 32.16 lakh crore. That means a single denomination is now carrying almost the entire weight of high-value cash transactions in India. Think about what that tells us. People are not using large bundles of rupees 20 and rupees 50 notes. They are not even using rupees 100 notes as much as they used to. Instead, consciously or unconsciously, they are concentrating their activity into one high-value denomination. In other words, they want fewer notes that carry more value. When that happens on a national scale, it normally reflects pressure in the general price level and an instinct to move value faster with less friction. Most listeners drop off after the first 2 minutes. Don't be one of them. Stay with me and pay close attention, because what I'm about to uncover will challenge everything you knew about how money actually behaves. Now look at the other end of the spectrum, the rupees 2000 note. Only 301 lakh pieces remain in circulation, worth rupees 6,012 crore, a tiny fraction of the total. The country has effectively stepped away from its highest denomination and quietly replaced it with a heavy reliance on rupees 500s and rupees 200s. Then another trend appears. For the first time, the RBI places e-rupees, the digital rupee, on the same table as physical cash. And the numbers are small in value, but massive in meaning. As of the same week, 125.87 lakh digital rupees were already in circulation, worth rupees 1,207.48 crore. Most of that is in the rupee 1 and e-rupees token, with some small use of the rupees 20 and rupees 10 digital denominations. Why does that matter? Because it shows that people have begun to migrate to a new form of legal tender, not issued by any private company, not driven by speculation, but by the sovereign itself. Even if the value is still small compared to physical notes, the pattern is the same as the early days of UPI. Extremely small tokens, used extremely frequently, multiplying in silence until eventually the system tips. Now fold in the coin data. India still has 13.91 crore lakh units of coins in circulation, worth rupees 38,029 crore. Over 5,424 crore of those are rupee 1 coins, followed by rupees 2 coins and rupees 5 coins. That means the country still depends heavily on coins for daily small value transactions, tea stalls, auto rickshaws, vegetable markets. But as prices rise and digital convenience creeps in, Even these transactions will slowly shift toward e-rupee or UPI-based micropayments. The average listener checks out in less than 90 seconds. But the ones who remain become the few who actually see what's coming. Stay with me, focus, and I promise you'll never look at currency the same way again. When viewed in isolation, these tables look like nothing more than denominations and numbers. But when viewed as a story, they become a powerful message. India is quietly rearranging the way value is stored and transferred. High-value physical notes are consolidating. Digital currency has entered the bloodstream. Coins are still alive, but increasingly out of step with the speed of the modern economy. The real question is not how many notes are there. It is what kind of future does this pattern point toward? A future where paper currency becomes the backup and sovereign digital money becomes the default. A future in which the RBI knows exactly how much value is moving when, where and where, not because it's controlling every transaction, but because the system itself is now part of the digital nervous system of the economy. Most citizens will not notice this shift, but those who do will understand that they must begin to ask more serious questions about how value is created, how it is controlled, and who ultimately commands the flow of money, because those decisions will no longer be driven by paper. They will be driven by code, and the time to understand that reality is before the transition is complete, not after. Your mind will want to switch off, that's natural. But if you stay with me and really pay attention, you'll discover why the shift from paper to code isn't just a banking trend. It's the beginning of an entirely new economic era. The most important learning from this report is that money itself is entering a transformation phase, and that transformation is already visible in the way different denominations are being used. Here's what it means for you as a common citizen. When rupees 500 becomes the dominant note in circulation, it is a sign that prices have risen and people need larger value currency just to perform ordinary transactions. In other words, inflation is no longer a theory, it is already being reflected in cash usage. When the rupees 2000 note almost disappears, it tells you that the government is intentionally reducing high-value anonymous transactions and pushing the system toward traceability. And when the RBI reports that over rupees 200 crore of e-rupee is already circulating in very small denominations like rupee 1 and rupees 20, it means the country has already entered the next phase of monetary evolution, where money will increasingly exist as code, not paper. So what should you do with this information? Do not ignore the shift toward digital sovereign money. The transition is slow and almost silent, but eventually the economy will operate primarily through digital rupee and UPI-linked systems. The people who understand this today will adapt easily tomorrow. Protect your purchasing power. A heavy jump toward rupees 500 notes means the value of smaller notes is silently being eroded. If you hold cash savings, understand that not acting is also a decision and often a costly one. Use your cash to acquire real value, skills, useful assets, productive investments. Prepare for a world in which every form of money is traceable. Once e-rupee becomes more widely adopted, privacy in transactions will dramatically decrease. That means accountability increases, but so does the need to be intentional and ethical in how you earn and spend. Demand transparency and justice in monetary policy. If the nature of money is changing, then so should the standards that govern it. Citizens need to start asking not just how much currency there is, but how that currency is created and who controls the mechanisms behind it. In short, this is not just an update on how many rupees 500 notes are out there. It's a reminder that the foundations of the monetary system are shifting, and if we do not pay attention now, we will be forced to adapt later with less control and less understanding. That's why this information matters. So don't just watch the change happen, position yourself for it and insist that it happens with fairness, transparency and accountability. Right about now, most people stop listening, and that's exactly why most people stay uninformed. Stay with me and pay attention, because the next few seconds will show you how this tiny shift in cash usage connects to the entire economic machine. Now, having seen how the very structure of cash circulation in India reveals the invisible pulse of price levels, behavioral shifts, and the early signs of a digital monetary order, let me take you a step further to the broader mechanism that makes sense of it all. Because currency in circulation is not an isolated statistic, it is the fuel flowing through the engine of the economic machine itself. And once we understand how that machine actually works, how transactions, credit, debt cycles, and productivity interact, we begin to see why this shift from paper to code is not just a technological upgrade, but a fundamental transformation in how economic value is created, distributed, and ultimately controlled. So let's zoom out and explore how this currency circulation connects to the larger mechanics of the economy as a whole. Imagine for a moment that the global economy is not an abstract, confusing field reserved for experts, but a grand machine, one constructed from simple, repetitive movements. It is not chaos that drives it, but human nature mirrored in trillions of transactions carried out every single day. And because so few truly understand this machinery, nations stumble into crisis after crisis, often needlessly. In my finance career, I've relied on a brutally simple and practical experience learned from my finance mentors, Winston Noronha, Almir Cholan, and the famous Ray Dalio, and learned this pattern that demonstrates these swings, and once you grasp it, you'll never again look at the economy the same way. At the heart of this machine lies something extraordinarily simple: the transaction. Every time you buy a meal, pay a bill, or invest in a stock, you are executing a transaction, exchanging money or credit for goods, services, or financial assets. Money spent plus credit spent equals total spending. Total spending divided by total goods sold gives us price, that's it. From this tiny and deceptively simple block, the entire economy and every boom or bust in it emerges. All markets, whether for wheat, cars, or equities, are simply collections of these transactions. Pull together every market in the country and you have the economy. Add up every dollar of spending and every good or service exchanged and you have everything you need to understand how the machine is moving. 4 players dominate these transactions: people, businesses, banks, and governments. And the single most powerful of these is government, specifically its 2 branches: the central government, which taxes and spends, and the central bank, which controls credit and money through interest rates and money printing. These 2 institutions sit at the core of the machine's flow of credit. And credit is the single most important and misunderstood part of the entire system. Credit fuels both spending and income. Borrowers use it to buy things they couldn't otherwise afford or invest in opportunities that create more income. Lenders use it to turn their money into more money. When borrowers seem trustworthy, when they have solid income and valuable collateral, credit is created. But the moment credit is created, debt is born. Debt becomes an asset for the lender and a liability for the borrower. If the borrower repays the principal plus interest, the asset and liability vanish. But until then, that debt exerts enormous power over the economy. If you're tempted to drift right now, that's exactly what the system is counting on. Stay with me and pay attention, because only those who understand this next shift will have the power to act before everyone else wakes up. Why does this matter so much? Because spending drives the economy, and credit allows spending to exceed income. When one person spends more, someone else earns more. And when someone's income rises, lenders feel confident and extend more credit. This leads to more spending, higher income, even more lending, and a self-reinforcing upward loop. This is why we have cycles. But to fully see the machine, you must understand that 3 forces drive it: productivity growth, the short-term debt cycle, and the long-term debt cycle. Productivity grows slowly and steadily over time. It reflects innovation, effort, and accumulated knowledge, and in the long run, it determines living standards. But it doesn't fluctuate much. The real volatility comes from credit-driven debt cycles. Without credit, the only way to grow is to work harder and produce more. But with credit, you can pull future spending into the present. Every time someone borrows, they spend more than they earn. Later, they must spend less to repay. That is the essence of a cycle, whether for one person or for an entire economy. The short-term debt cycle plays out over 5 to 8 years. It starts with expansion. Credit is cheap, people borrow and spend, incomes rise, prices rise, and inflation begins. The central bank raises interest rates to keep inflation in check. Borrowing slows, debt payments increase, people spend less, incomes fall, and soon the cycle turns into a recession. To reverse this, the central bank lowers interest rates, making borrowing cheaper, and the expansion begins again. These short-term cycles repeat again and again, stair-stepping the economy upward, each time ending with more debt than before. Over time, however, debt accumulates faster than income and short-term fixes no longer work. This is when the long-term debt cycle emerges. Everyone feels confident, borrowing soars. Asset prices surge, the stock market booms. People feel wealthy and continue to borrow and spend. Debts grow larger, but because incomes and asset values are rising, the burden seems manageable. This is the boom, this is the bubble. But it cannot last. Eventually, debt payments begin to outpace income. Borrowers cut spending, income falls. Credit dries up, asset prices collapse. That moment is the long-term debt peak, and it leads straight into a deleveraging. In a deleveraging, borrowers can't repay, lenders stop lending, spending drops, incomes crash, and people rush to sell assets. Credit disappears. A vicious cycle begins. Less spending leads to less income, which leads to less creditworthiness, which leads to even less credit and even lower asset prices. What makes a deleveraging different from an ordinary recession? Interest rates are already near zero. Lowering them further does nothing. The system is frozen. There are only 4 possible ways to reduce debt burdens during a deleveraging: cut spending, austerity; reduce debts through defaults or restructurings; redistribute wealth from the haves to the have-nots; print money. Cutting spending sounds sensible, but it is deflationary and painful. Incomes fall even faster than debt, making the debt burden worse. Defaults and restructurings destroy what people believed was wealth, hammering incomes and collateral values further. Governments step in with stimulus and unemployment benefits, but this raises deficits. To fund the deficits, governments raise taxes, usually on the wealthy, which increases social tension. If the depression lasts, social unrest erupts. Within countries, resentment grows between the rich and the poor. Between countries, creditors and debtors clash. Political upheaval becomes likely. Eventually, the central bank steps in and prints money. It buys financial assets and government bonds, pushing up asset prices and making borrowers seem creditworthy again. Governments increase spending using the newly created money. Incomes start to stabilize. Done correctly, balancing austerity, debt reduction, wealth redistribution and money printing, a beautiful deleveraging can occur. Debt declines relative to income. Growth returns, inflation remains under control. If done poorly, inflation explodes and the system collapses. In a beautiful deleveraging, people regain confidence, lenders begin lending, borrowers borrow, spending rises, incomes revive, and the long-term cycle reinflates. This entire process usually takes a decade or more. Some call it a lost decade, but when the balance is right, society emerges stronger and more stable. When you layer the slow, steady rise of productivity over the short and long-term debt cycles, you gain a powerful understanding where we've been, where we are now, and where we are going next. 3 timeless rules emerge. First, never allow debt to grow faster than income, or the burden will eventually crush you. Second, never allow income to grow faster than productivity, or you will become uncompetitive. Third, always do everything you can to raise productivity, because in the long run, that is what matters most. So now that you've seen how currency circulation is shifting, and how the entire economic machine works behind the scenes, I want you to stay with me and focus, because the real question isn't what is happening, but what it means for us as Muslims. These changes in money and credit are not random. They are signs from Allah, and they will test whether we earn and spend in a way that brings His pleasure or His anger. Most people will switch off at this point. Don't be one of them. Stay with me to the end, and I'll show you how to read these economic signals through the lens of Quran and Sunnah, and how to protect your wealth, your ethics, and your akira in the middle of this transition. And if we look at everything we've discussed, the consolidation of high-value notes, the silent rise of the digital rupee, the way credit builds cycles of boom and collapse, we realize that this is not merely an economic evolution. It is a spiritual reminder. Allah tells us in Quran Surah Hadid chapter 57 verse 20. Know that the life of this world is but amusement and diversion and adornment and boasting to one another and competition in increase of wealth and children, like the example of a rain whose resulting plant growth pleases the tillers. Then it dries and you see it turned yellow, then it becomes scattered debris. And in the hereafter is severe punishment and forgiveness from Allah and approval. And what is the worldly life except the enjoyment of delusion? Today wealth has become nothing more than numbers, first on paper, now in code, moving faster than ever and driven by pure human desire. But remember, the entire economic machine we've just uncovered is still subject to divine law. Every transaction, every loan, every debt cycle is being recorded by the one who said in Quran Surah Al-Imran chapter 3 verse 180. And let not those who greedily withhold what Allah has given them of His bounty ever think that it is better for them. Rather, it is worse for them. Their necks will be encircled by what they withheld on the day of resurrection. And to Allah belongs the heritage of the heavens and the earth. And Allah of what you do is fully aware. As digital systems increase traceability on earth, they also remind us that nothing is hidden from the heavenly ledger. The Prophet, peace be upon him, made it very clear in Hadith Jami'at Tirmizi 24:17. Abu Barza al-Aslami narrated that the Messenger of Allah, peace be upon him, said, "The feet of the slave, O Allah, shall not move on the day of judgment until he is asked about 5 things: about his life and what he did with it, about his knowledge and what he did with, about his wealth and how he earned it, and where he spent it on, about his body and for what did he wear it out." He said, this hadith is Hasan Sahih. Sa'id bin Abdullah bin Jurayz, a narrator in the chain, is from Al-Basra and he is the freed slave Abu Barza al-Aslami, and Abu Barza al-Aslami's name is Nadla bin Ubayd, grade Zayef Daruzam. So as we see currency shifting from paper to code and credit driving entire nations into cycles of debt, we must not just analyze the system. We must purify our participation in it. We must check our earnings, avoid riba, support fair circulation of wealth and uphold justice, because Allah also says in Quran Surah Nisa chapter 4 verse 135, O you who have believed, be persistently standing firm in justice, witnesses for Allah, even if it be against selves or parents and relatives. Whether one is rich or poor, Allah is more worthy of both. So follow not personal inclination lest you not be just. And if you distort your testimony or refuse to give it, then indeed Allah is ever of what you do aware. The real point is this: economic change is not just happening around us, it is happening for us. To test whether we will use our money in the way Allah loves or fall into the traps of consumption and injustice. And the intelligent believer is the one who recognizes those signs before the system completes its transition. Most people, including many policymakers, fail to understand these simple truths. But once you do, the economy ceases to be a mystery. It becomes an elegant, predictable machine, one that you can read, navigate, and even use to your advantage in a goodly way. That brings us to the end of today's episode, and if you've stayed with me until now, you're already ahead of most people. You now understand that the transition from paper to code isn't just a change in how we pay. It's a fundamental shift in how value is created, stored, and controlled. My sincere advice: don't just observe this shift. Position yourself for it. Protect your purchasing power, demand transparency, and stay deeply informed. I'm Zayed Haji. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode where we go even deeper into the mechanics of the global financial system.